Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amour de Soi Wellness, and Donovon Jenson is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is Donovan. And today I have really exciting news because Donovan is releasing his new book, Mindscaping, a practical guide for how to be happier. So obviously such an expert on happiness. I'm really excited to hear, how did this come about? What's your story in how this book manifested? What's your reason behind it?
Yeah, so this book is kind of the culmination of my wandering path up till now. I've kind of been a little bit all over the place. And over time, I've slowly realized that one of the things that I'm most interested in is happiness. I thought that having a psych degree would have helped some in that regard, but it really taught me about the structure of the mind as opposed to what it is that we need to function day to day and have a good time. So towards the end of my college career, I was in a very, very dark place, very depressed stage of life. And this book is kind of the culmination of all the steps that I took to get from there to where I am now. So it's about a process, for finding happiness. It's not this cookie cutter, like do X, Y, and Z, go meditate, wake up at 6 a.m. It's not that, but it's more of a framework to kind of slot different resources into and then produce happiness over time. And the reason that I went with this angle as opposed to something really, really concrete, and there are tons of examples or tools to try, but the problem that I had is that I would read a lot of books in kind of the self-help personal development space, and they were either too airy, so there wasn't enough practical application, or they were very, very narrowed in. So it would say, like I was saying, wake up at 6 a.m. This book is about waking up at 6 a.m. and getting stuff done. And I realized that what you really need is more of a framework, or at least that's the starting point that I would have loved to have, however many years ago. So this book is my best attempt at saying, okay, here's the framework. Here's a bunch of stuff to try. I can't promise that these specific tools will work, but the strategies, the high level framework, that's the stuff that's important. And that's the stuff that eventually over time, if you keep working at, you're going to increase your levels of happiness. That's kind of the rough idea of how I got here.
Interesting. So when you talk about framework, can you give an example of what that might look like if someone were to pick up your book and they're dealing with depression or just feeling low? Is it kind of like a choose your own adventure type of thing? Or what? Can you tell a little more about that?
Yes, I think maybe the best way to describe it is to bring in the metaphor immediately, right? And the metaphor is the mind as a landscape, right? And in the same way, if you owned a piece of land and you wanted to beautify it or make it better or improve it, the first thing to think about is there's not really a perfect setup, right? Like you're not going to say like, oh, the jungle is better than the beach. You can't, right? It's perfect personal preference. And in the same way, our minds are kind of set up in a way that like there's no one size fits all solution. So to some degree, it does have to be sort of a choose your own adventure. Now, I know you mentioned specifically kind of this depression angle. I don't know that this book is necessarily the best path for something specific, right? What you're going to want to pick up is a resource on depression. But my book will do is give you a framework for slotting in that information that you get from this other resources about like, here's what to do if you have depression. Here's some things that generally work, and give you kind of a structure for trying those different strategies out. So the way that I look at it is it's more of a process as opposed to a really specific solution to something. Now, the other part, going back to what you're asking, is, about the framework, right? And it's very, very simple at the core. And it goes back to this idea of a landscape, which is basically you just go through a series of steps. If you had a landscape and you wanted to build something new, first you got to figure out what's there, right? If you don't know what's there, you don't know what you can build. Second piece is to come up with a plan. Same thing, like you have to have some idea of what you're building. The third piece is to actually execute it. And then the fourth piece is to kind of review that and see where you're at, and then just keep spinning through that cycle. Sounds really super simple. It is, but the actual details of going through all of those steps and processes, there's a lot more nuance to delve into. But at the highest level, it's the exact same thing as what you need to do with your mind. You got to figure out what's going on in there first. You got to figure out what it is that you would like to go on, or the type of life that you want. Then you got to figure out actual steps to implement and implement them. Then after that, your blueprint, your guess may or may not be effective. So you got to reevaluate. And, I've kind of set it up in sequential order, but it's really more of a process of just continual, you may go here, then jump over here, then down there, or you might start here and loop around a couple times and then jump back. But it's all about this process that I think mirrors kind of beautifying a landscape really well.
Yeah, no, I love that analogy. And that's, I think, a great way for people to visualize what it is or conceptualize what it is that you're going after in this book. And I like the idea of, it's not a cookie cutter type of answer, like just do this and you'll be happy, because everyone is different. Everyone's dealing with their own type of situation, and everyone has a different way of responding to certain types of tools and tips. And what I really like about what you said is at the end of the reevaluation part, because it's like, yeah, you choose your own adventure and you pull in the tools that are unique, but you don't exactly know how the result is going to end up until you get to the end. And you're like, maybe I'm happier, but this is an opportunity for you to explore. Okay, well, we can recycle or reuse and maybe kind of reassess. Maybe if I chose a different pathway, it might lead to a different outcome. Maybe I might feel more happy or less happy, but at least you're knowing, and you're kind of accepting that process, I think, is really important and key.
Yeah. So one of the points that I touch on pretty hard is that you need experience to know what it is that you actually enjoy. Because we're really good at projecting things that we think might be better.
Right.
When we actually get there, they may not be. And I think the clearest example of this is when you have achievement orientation, right? Where it's like, oh, as soon as I, get this book launched, then I'll be happy.
Right.
And there's this projection of like, oh, this thing is going to produce a lot of well-being. But you have to actually get there. With achievement orientation, we kind of have some good research and ideas that like that's not going to work. But for a lot of other things, you have to actually go through the experience before you can have any idea what type of experience it's going to produce.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's kind of how life goes, not just happiness, in that you have to test things out. You can totally plan the rest of your life, and it's probably not going to go perfectly to plan, because life happens and there could be curveballs and things and situations. Like nobody could anticipate a pandemic was going to happen last year. So that throws things for a loop, and we just have to kind of roll with the punches and readjust and understand that, in waiting for the perfect plan, it's like, even if you have the perfect plan, it doesn't mean it's going to manifest in the way that you planned out. So it's just like, you got to take a step and take an action, and then you can reevaluate and keep going. I love that.
There's one short section. It's relatively short, but it is about, again, going back to this landscape idea, natural disasters, right? Like this pandemic fits right into that. Where it's like, as you're kind of building out and working on this landscape, there's going to be times when unexpected things happen and just destroy part of it. Right. And like, you have to just be prepared to kind of adjust the best that you can. It's the same thing with your mind. It's not like this perfect linear path where nothing ever goes wrong. Like, you still have to keep working with stuff, working around things. Something may come along and change your life in a way that disrupts your blueprint for what you wanted to build. And so you have to take a couple steps back and kind of reevaluate what makes sense. So I just wanted to highlight another piece that's lodged in there.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think some people have this idea that I want to try to get to 100% happy. And that's not realistic for any human being, in that every human being is going to deal with ups and downs in life. And that's part of it. But it's just like, when you're in your down, how quickly can you get back into your up, and know that, you're not going to be in your down forever, and you're not going to be in your up forever. So understanding that is what it is to be human, I think, is really key too.
Yeah, and that makes me think of also the other major piece, and I think that will cover basically all of my book. But the other major piece is the actual definition, or my working definition of what happiness is, or what we're actually working at. Because I feel like that gets skipped over a lot, where it's just like, oh, well, let's just be happier. Let's just have a better life. But like, what do you actually mean by that? And for me, that piece is basically saying like, happiness is essentially evaluating experiences. And in the book, I break it down in a lot of different, more nuanced pieces. But basically, there's these states and these evaluations, right? We have some sort of experience, a feeling, a thought, something. And then our relationship with that experience dictates how happy or not we are when we evaluate it. So I think an example would be working out, right? And maybe I've given this example before, but working out is inherently the state, the actual experience is unpleasant. And another thing that I want to bring out is when I think of happiness, I think of experiences plus evaluation as more or less desirable, right? And then at some point you call that happiness, but there's like getting a massage is probably over here, getting groceries is probably somewhere in the middle, and getting punched or something is probably down here. Because like I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily happy nor unhappy while grocery shopping is just a thing that's happening. So that's another piece, is that it kind of goes on the spectrum. Anyway, going back to working out, like inherently the actual experience is often one of pain, right? It's actually pain. And so the baseline experience starts somewhere in the negative column or the less desirable. And then you can change your evaluation or your relationship with that experience. So if you take it as, I hate working out, this sucks, then it moves farther this way. But if you take it as, this pain signals that, I'm getting growth, I'm making progress, whatever, then it moves up towards more desirable because we've worked on the relationship. So the whole point of the book is to find ways to either change the actual states, right? So to change, if you have back problems or whatever, taking the actual actions you need to get those fixed, and depending on the situation, changing your relationship with those events when possible. Because that piece we can always work on to some degree is this relationship. But I also think something that I've seen missing from a lot of resources, a lot of times we can actually change the situation itself too, right? Like a lot of times, sure, you can think about it more positively or whatever else, but you can also just change some other actions to avoid it altogether. So that's kind of the core piece that everything else rides on, is how do you improve those two things, your actual experiences or your relationship with experiences. And then the rest of the framework is just, here's how we actually plan for that and execute it and the nuances of that.
Yeah. No, that's a really good way to view it. And I think I like your workout example of being able to see that, it's almost how you frame it in your mind. This is good, this is bad, can dictate which direction that you go. Because, for me, working out, it's like when I'm really sore, I don't like being really sore. But if I never feel sore, then I'm like, I don't feel like I worked out hard enough. I'm working and growing my muscles. So it's just like that catch-22. But I think ultimately it's like a good kind of hurt, because I know I'm moving and making progress to where I want to go.
Yeah, and I do also want to flag, I do think sometimes, and maybe I already said this, but sometimes people get very, very far in the camp of like, I can just change my relation to everything and it'll be awesome. But there are definitely certain things that suck. Like there are things that are not nice to experience. And so at a certain point, you want to focus on changing those, the actual events. But your relationship is the only thing that you always have some influence over. That's pretty much the core of it. That's the guts of what's in the book. And then there's a bunch of actual details, exercises, reflection questions, things to kind of shore up those ideas and make them a little bit more concrete or approachable, or give you a little bit more guidance towards introspection on them. Because it's another problem I had with a lot of personal development, self-help resources. It'd be like, be nicer to everyone else. And it's like, okay, cool. Yeah. And then like,
what is that?
Wait, I don't know how to do that. Like, what am I supposed to do? Or like, oh, cool, I'm being nicer to people. And it's like, are you tracking it? Are you paying attention to it? How do you know what's your baseline? So I've tried to include a bunch of different resources that can help facilitate that. It's still fairly self-serve. In the future, I would like to move towards things like workbooks or software or other things that kind of structure it for people so they can just focus on doing the actual work, as opposed to like, okay, I have to get a piece of paper and write out all these different category blocks and yada, yada, yada. But that's one step at a time. Let's get the book actually out into the hands of people and then go from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that you are giving structure and just clear how-tos. I mean, you are the founder of How to Happy, so it's good to give clear guidelines on what does that look like and what are some like actual action steps rather than like a conceptual type of frame of mind. I'm curious though, one thing I was thinking about, when you had given your reference of like shopping is kind of neutral, doing something like petting your dog might give you more happiness and getting punched on the lower end. What if someone is like, I feel so perfectly happy petting a dog or something to that nature, but there could be other things in life of that might expand their happiness, but it's with outside of their realm of what they know, like, having a child or, getting on TV. I don't know, something that would just like, it doesn't seem like it's too far-fetched for them perhaps, but it could potentially increase their happiness, but it's kind of like in the unknown realm. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so there's two different angles I want to hit this from. One is in this book, setting up your values and getting clear on your values is a very strong piece of what I talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And going along with that, once you have your values, branching into goals related to that and activities related to that will bring you purpose and pleasure. If you're in the lucky position where pretty much everything seems awesome, I am actually not going to argue that there's too much stuff that you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
I do, however, mention that if you're in that position, and honestly, even if you're not, you should occasionally step out of your comfort zone to try different things for two reasons. One, you may find an activity that's actually nicer than anything you've ever done, which you can't know until you do it, because there's such a wide range of experiences in the world that you have to explore a little bit to determine what it is. Going back to the scale, you might find that, petting your dog is over here, but if you haven't tried enough things, you may not know the scale goes here. So that's one piece of it, is just kind of making sure that you're getting a taste of everything. The second reason that it's important, I think, to occasionally step out of your comfort zone is going back to these natural disasters. There will be times in life where you have to face uncertainty, and doing it on your own terms occasionally allows you to build that resilience in a way that's manageable, so that when these unexpected circumstances or changes happen, you are more prepared to adapt. So petting your dog is probably like a small enough example that it doesn't quite fit. But let's say that, you have your gym that you go to and you love it and you've been going forever. Well, if that gym closes and you've never explored any other alternatives, you may not have the tools that you need to figure out something to fit into that same block of your life. So I'm not saying like, oh, you have to constantly try new things and do all this stuff and push yourself, because you don't. Some people want to do that and it's nice for some people and others don't. But if you choose not to ever push yourself and never step out of your comfort zone, then when the world forces it on you, you will be less prepared to adapt than you would be otherwise.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have any other suggestions for when people get thrown a major life event or disaster that kind of messes up? I'm trying to compare it to the landscaping idea. If like someone threw a grenade in your yard, that really, there's like a lot of damage to be done in your yard. And what are your thoughts about how to address that?
Yeah, so basically one of the pieces, or one of the things to think about from this framework is mapping tools. And by tools, I just mean the things you use to try to make changes in your mind or your landscape to the severity of the problem. So I'm going to change your example a bit, but let's say someone threw a grenade in your plumbing.
Okay. Oh, that's worse. That'd be terrible.
So, if that stuff is absolutely destroyed, what you want to do is get a plumber. You want to get someone in there who can help you. Unless you happen to be an expert plumber yourself, you want someone with enough expertise. Now, if you have just like a leaky pipe or something, maybe you can fix that yourself. Maybe it's not important. Maybe it's not causing you a lot of problems. But
Yeah.
again, a grenade in your pipes is going to cause a ton of problems.
Yeah.
I think looking at your mind kind of the same way is useful. I know not everyone has the resources to do this type of stuff, but like, let's say that you are in the midst of a divorce. What you're going to
Mm.
want is someone who specializes in divorce, right? Like a therapist or a counselor or somebody who can help you through that process.
Mhm.
Or, with the same example, if you happen to have a lot of tools around managing relationships and all that kind of stuff, maybe all you need is a book. As again, like if you're a master plumber, maybe you can put your plumbing back together yourself.
Right.
That's the way that I think about these things is
Mhm.
how big is the problem or how big is the thing that you're trying to change? How
Mhm.
much experience do you have and what resources are available to you?
Mhm.
Because if you have something seriously impacting your life negatively and you have the resources to do so, you should use stronger resources.
Mm.
Now, if you're just, like snoring and you don't want to snore, going to like a 30-day intensive retreat to stop snoring might be overkill. Like it might not, and I don't know if such a thing even exists, but that might be overkill. Like maybe that's not really impacting your life.
Yeah.
But that's the way that I kind of think about any of these life changes
Mhm.
is just mapping the tools or the actions you take to fix them to
Mhm.
the scope of the problem. And if you do some of the earlier exercises in kind of like the what's going on there, the
Mhm.
survey of your mind and the survey of your landscape,
Yeah.
as well as your blueprint and figuring out what it is that you want.
Mhm.
Um, Hopefully that gives some clarity around, okay, this is how important this thing is. This is how much
Mhm.
time I should dedicate it to it. This is what extra resources I should look for. But
Mhm.
again, that's what a lot of the book is if you have a specific problem like that, I don't have anything for you because I don't know that much about divorce. Like and not only that, I can't cover even if I did, I can't cover all possible
Right.
serious problems.
Mhm.
So in a lot of the realms, it's frameworks for thinking about things, processes for finding the right resources, processes for uh, kind of executing things and
Mhm.
seeing where they fall.
Mm. Yeah, that's really smart because, not all of us can be plumbers, and we really shouldn't shouldn't try a lot of the times because that could be a bigger disaster, giant flooded yard. So, yeah, that makes sense. Great. Well, was there any other things you'd like to share about the book that you think our audience would benefit from?
Let's see. Yeah, I guess there is just there's a lot of information packed
Mhm.
into this book, so it's kind of hard to encapsulate all of it. It probably
Yeah.
sounded like I was wandering quite a bit,
Mhm.
but I do think, at least personally, this has provided a really nice foundation for me to build off of. The other thing to note is that this is not set up as a quick fix type of thing. This
Yeah.
is definitely set up as here are a set of processes that over time will produce more percent of time in higher desirable states.
Mm.
Um, so I just want it to be clear kind of what's in there or what people should expect.
Mhm.
The other piece is, as cliche as this is, it's one of those you get out as much as you put in, right?
Right.
There's going to be useful information and ways to frame things and exercises and tools and whatnot, but without doing any of it, you're really missing a lot of the benefit. And there is also kind of this growth process that happens as you use the tools.
Mhm.
So you get better and more refined at identifying and executing on things that you want faster.
Mm.
The other piece is this book is largely focused on happiness, or at least has that at front and center. But it's also just generally a way to get more things done or be successful or align your actions with things that you want to do. In
Mhm.
my mind, that all feeds into happiness. It's all in the same bucket.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a lot of around like here's how you change habits, here's how you execute goals, here's how you track that, here's how you make sure you're doing what you said you were going to do, or here's how you find adjustments if things aren't working and stuff like that. So it's not just this simple process of like change the way you think about things. I
Yeah.
really feel like it's a very comprehensive set of ideas, and that's why
Mhm.
it's kind of long.
Yeah. Well, it's not just ideas, it's actually practical application, which is, really, you can get concepts about happiness all day long, but at the end of the day, what's actually going to make you happy is the actions you take, which is the theme of our show. And so it's like all about those tools, and yeah, you get what you put into it. Makes sense. Great. Awesome. Well, Donovan, I'm super excited for your book. I'm going to go buy it right now. And everyone, you need to go to Amazon right now, get Mindscaping, because it is going to change your life and you're going to be happier, more successful, and get more stuff done. Thanks for sharing, Donovan.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. And thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and then go and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you get notified when the next video comes out. If you check out in the description below, go to my website where you can get my free fast and easy guide to stress relief. Thanks again for checking us out, and we'll see you next time.